But it might be hard to believe 2022 midterms are already right around the corner, and some Democratic politicos are starting to get nervous. The Hill's Max Greenwood writes that amongst Dem operative and strategist circles, a sense of pessimism about 2022 is growing rapidly. Attributed to President Biden's free-falling approval ratings and the continued stalling of Democrats' Build Back Better agenda in Congress.
Democrats don't have much room for error either. Team Blue currently holds majority in the Senate by the literal smallest of margins, and the electoral math just isn't on their side when it comes to extending that hold to 2022. According to Vox, the 2020 presidential election revealed that mathematically Democratic voters are spread across fewer states than GOP voters, leaving Dems with little cushion should they lose control of any of their narrowly held seats in purple states, like Raphael Warnock's seat in Georgia or Mark Kelly's in Arizona. Host of Bad Faith podcast, former National Press Secretary for the Bernie Sanders campaign and great friend of the show, Briahna Joy Gray, joins us now to read her 2022 tea leaves. Welcome back, Briahna.
Thank you. Thank you. Tea it is indeed.
Tea, let's spill the tea. Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire gets overlooked in a lot of these conversations, yet, inside D.C., she's looked at as perhaps the most vulnerable Democrat, even more so than Warnock and Kelly. In fact, it was one of the quiet obstacles to raising the minimum wage. She's what I've heard is an obstacle to getting immigration reform done through reconciliation. She represents New Hampshire, where she's basically just trying to hide and skate through to re-election. At this point, if we're talking after the midterms, how do you expect things are going to go, and what can Democrats do to turn it around between now and then?
Well, I think the dirtiest trick that the devil ever pulled in Washington, D.C. was convincing people that there's a gap between doing what people want and electability. The reality is that across this country, even though progressives have been roundly blamed for all losses, electoral losses in the history of all time, the reality is that the closer that people come to the core progressive agenda, I'm talking things like a $15 minimum wage, which we all here know won in Florida with 60% of the vote, even though Donald Trump won the presidency. We're talking things like health care reform. We're talking things like basic worker protections. These are the things, jobs guarantees, basic environmental reforms, et cetera, that are overwhelmingly popular with everyday voters, which is why it is so frustrating to see these infrastructure bills, which contain many of those policies that are not only hotly desired, but especially needed in the context of this economic and health crisis, including the child tax credit, be at the chopping block. And what you see is a lot of corporate conservative Democrats and their allies going on TV to explain that the way to right this ship is, in fact, to move more to the right. But Joe Biden was a corporate moderate Dem who has failed to enact even his own corporate moderate agenda. And the response you're getting from people across the country, organizers across the country, most notably those that I've been listening to in Georgia, is that we're not going to be able to sell the same pablum during midterms. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. And instead of actually reckoning with whether or not there's any last minute things that can be done with respect to $2,000 checks, with respect to canceling student debt, which Joe Biden could do with a flick of a pen, instead we have a continued hand-wringing that seems only geared towards setting the party up for justifying continuing to ignore what the people on the ground actually want.
Just this week, 3 Democratic House members announced they won't be running for re-election, including John Yarmuth, chairman of the House Budget Committee, and Representatives Mike Doyle of Pennsylvania and David Price of North Carolina. Is this a sign? I mean, are people fleeing a sinking ship? It's looking like it's going to be a bloodbath, honestly. I think no matter what Democrats do, it's just the reality of the electoral map of where Democratic voters have decided to concentrate where they live. It's looking like it's going to be bad either way. Do you think getting this legislative package done would make significant progress in halting that?
Well, right. Well, first, it's not just that Democrats have decided to concentrate where they live. It's the fact that we have an anti-democratic system of accounting votes and weighing the various electoral significance of parts of the country that was designed to undermine a pure one-to-one Democratic representation system, right? It was intentionally designed to prevent large slaveholding states from being able to exercise the large Black populations and have outsized weight. At the same time, we have a Senate, obviously, which has direct representation, 2 senators for every state, despite the population density. And that's a system that could be changed if people were really invested in having a more direct democracy. However, as it is, you're correct. It's been an uphill battle for Democrats, especially now as David Shore has very kind of popularly described that the field has gotten even worse, dramatically so, since Obama won in 2008, 2012. And so now we're contending with a situation which has been pretty clear from the day that Biden took office, which is that he very, very narrowly won, and it was going to take some big ticket FDR-style items to actually give him the kind of popularity boost to overcome those odds. And that's why progressives like myself have been pushing since January, since day one, for Joe Biden to at very least follow through on his own campaign promises. And the response from the big brain know everything Democrats has been, give him time. You're being too hard on him. He needs time to enact his agenda. Let him do it his way. And now we're at the very, very end of a cycle, during the time cycle during which he had any opportunity to make any difference. And it becomes clear that the progressives in Congress should have also realized this and started making a push, I think, earlier on to make it clear that there are some fighters in Congress that could have potentially changed the outcome and at very least highlighted the extent to which there are enormously popular policies that could have moved the needle for Joe Biden. And there remain some popular policies that he could do by executive order. I really want to highlight that student debt cancellation is something that the administration has been dragging their feet on. It's something free community college reporting is that is now cut from the reconciliation bills, but it's something that he ran on, canceling at least $10,000 of student debt, and which people have a huge appetite for and are really excited for, and which is going to be a huge conversation point in January when those student debt remittances go back into effect.
Right, and he was riding high after the February March, the American Rescue Plan, the checks are coming out the door, the child tax credit. Democrats, if you remember, they were really feeling their oats. They were like, wow, people are happy with something that we've done. And instead of drawing the lesson from that, well, let's continue to do things. They, like you said, they just kind of sat and did nothing for several months after that, really only kicking into gear in kind of spring and early summer, and allowing this process to drag out in public in a way that they knew from 2009, 2010. If you drag these legislative processes out in the public, the public just sees confusion and they see a feeble party that can't agree and can't get anything done. Republicans learned that lesson. 2017, they were like, let's do a tax cut. And then like 2 weeks later, they had done a tax cut. There wasn't a 6 month just rending of garments and grappling with, are we going to trade off this billionaire's tax break for this billionaire children's tax break? No, they just did it all, and they did it fast. And they did it
for reconciliation, and they did it over the objections of a parliamentarian who they simply fired because you can do that, right?
Well, that was earlier, but yes, yeah.
Right. So. Look, the problem is that there's a lack of confidence that the people have that elected representatives, frankly, of either party are going to represent them. Increasing numbers of Democrats, including increasing numbers of Black and brown Democrats, are no longer identifying as liberal. People want to be independent, not because of partisan leanings, but because there's a lack of confidence in government. And when you run on very specific policies, tell people that their votes matter, that you're the base of the Democratic Party, that if you just win Georgia for us, the sky is the limit. And then you fail to follow through, not on things that were held up by Congress, but on executive orders that you could have passed on your own. Sherilyn Ifill and the famous leaked call, the Biden administration call with Black civil rights leaders, she asked him, please, you can do many aspects of the George Floyd Act by executive order. Can you do this for us? And his response during that leaked call was to berate the Black civil rights leaders present, and then to subsequently not follow up on that promise, to break his own promise to pass the act by the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. And now, after the largest protest movement in American history, you would think that the last summer it didn't even happen. And it's not necessarily that you're going to get another round of protests or people out in the streets angry again, but you also can't expect them to get out in the streets and vote for you.
Briahna, thanks so much for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
And we'll have more Rising right after this. Please stick with us.